Thoughts by Brian D.K. Introduction. Poetry versus thinking. When I first began writing these thoughts, long before I had any intention to make a book out of them, I was guided by an ideal that I eventually spelled out explicitly in one of those early writings, a drunken poem. I sought to use the minimum words necessary to make as accurate a statement as possible. I also maintained a strict adherence to a rather strange notion that I had developed, that each line should be the smallest unit that could function as an independent or semi-independent clause within the whole. This gave rise to a very asymmetrical, ragged edge to my thought poems. At first, I reveled in this anti-aesthetic, but I began to find it increasingly unpleasing. It became entirely unpractical once I began to transfer my thoughts from the wide page format of my word processor to the narrow page format of this book, so I mostly abandoned it. As I allowed my personal aesthetic to develop over the decade reflected in this book, I began to admit more and more infiltration from non-essential physical qualities, rhythmic and phonological niceties, which seemed to want to be in the texts. At some point, I realized that the style had morphed into something that almost felt Rococo. Well, so what? I like Rococo as much as Rothko, which is simply to say, minimalism and maximalism can both be good if done well. I have never been against play, nor taken a pared-down approach out of any regard for stoic self-abnegation. Many might argue that my work was never really pared down anyway. On the contrary, I firmly believe that pure indulgence is the source of all that is good in art, and if I have ever indulged in a pared down aesthetic, it was only because I derived a frivolous enjoyment from it. I cannot see any alternative to this precept. All philosophy is frivolity. Moreover, life itself is a frivolity. My most frivolous enjoyment to date is still derived from the exploration of subtle ideas and perspectives through the process of articulation. I once read a maxim in a book on analytical writing which said, "A good piece of writing is a good piece of thinking," while Coleridge's Kubla Khan disproves this maxim, i.e., a good piece of writing might also be the hazy product of an opium dream. It still retains a certain level of relative truth, one that remains highly relevant to my own approach.